And my son called me and he was like, Mom, you need to get to the school. I was like, wow, what's going on? He was like, something going on with my brother. You know, the police is on him. I was like, what? So I ran out the door to my husband and told him we need to get to the school. Something is going on with my son. So when we got to the school, as we approached the school, they had the school on lockdown, and I was trying to get in to see what's going on. But as I got into the driveway, I seen the police with my child in the back of the police car, handcuffed, and he was crying. I immediately at that moment asked the officer to unhandcuff my child and let me get my kid. And at that time, that's when he immediately called backup, and when he called his backup, they came, and I put my hand up because when they got out the car, they had pulled out their guns already. So I put my hand up and I stood up and stood right in front of my son because I didn't know what was going on, what happened. I literally was just coming to the school to see why was my son being detained by an officer at that moment.
And Malcolm?
Yes, more to reiterate on that, the school, they failed to notify the parents about any altercation with your child. I mean, you know, you want to send your kid to school to be safe and not arrested, and most importantly, handcuffed. I have an African-American young black kid. I mean, y'all know being black in America is real hard, you know, and having your child sent to the place where they're supposed to be the safest at, and being arrested, put in the back of the police car, and pretty much just treated like trash. Charges put on you. This is supposed to be a education system that's supposed to help the kid get to the next level. And why would you have an officer here trying to put charges on the kid that are all false allegations? As the lawyer said, everything's been dropped. And you can't get a stepping stone out of somebody already knocking you back, you know what I'm saying? As far as the charges being put on them and all the false allegations just to get lunch. Zaxby's to be exact.
He was just getting his lunch, and he was told from one that he could get his lunch, and then the officer felt like he shouldn't been able to get his lunch, and it just escalated from there. Reach out to the school. No one called me the next day. I did not send my son to school because I didn't feel like that school was safe for my baby no more. And the officer ended up calling me the next day, and he was telling me that I had to turn my son in. And I was like, why? For what? And he was like, if you don't bring him to turn him in, then I'll personally come and pick him up myself. And I was like, no. And that's immediately when I got on the phone and called my lawyer because I'm like, what is going on?
And that's when I got involved. And one thing that Ms. Brandon didn't mention is that she's had to, and Malcolm as well, they've had to repeatedly stand up for their child. You know, being a parent of a special needs child calls for a different level of vigorousness for your child to ensure that they're protected, that they're safe, that others around your child are treating them fair. And as the parents of their child in this situation, the worst call they could have got was that their son was handcuffed and put in the back of a car when he did absolutely nothing wrong. And on top of that, they prosecuted him. He had to go through the criminal justice process. He came to this courthouse plenty of times. He was encouraged to enter into a plea of guilty. I encouraged the Brandons, and they encouraged their son as well, that he should not plead guilty for anything that he's not guilty of. After pushing back against that for a while, the case was ultimately dismissed. That's why we're here now. That's why it's taking this time, because they criminally prosecuted him. We had to get through that process. And what the Brandons want is full justice and accountability. They're standing up for their son. They're also standing up for other special needs children, that they should be able to go to school and be safe. If we're going to have police officers in schools, they have to be able to deal with the kids that are there.
They need to be trained.
They need to be trained. Their son has an IEP, an individualized educational plan. Everybody knows with IEP, that's in their record so that the administrators and staff know how to deal with the child. In this situation, if he's getting instructions from one administrator that you can do something, and then an officer saying, give me your lunch, the officer probably was not familiar with his plan, even though he should have been familiar with the plan, and he's taking that as disorderly. There's nothing disorderly about somebody who deals with autism. They're on the spectrum. They have an individualized educational plan. They have challenges with expressive language, ADD, and other conditions.
And the school is aware they're aware that anyone that come into contact with my son, by him having an IEP since he was in elementary, that anyone that come in contact with him should know how to address him. Not, chase him back and forth. That triggers. He's trying to leave after you saying no, he can't get a lunch. He's trying to leave to go back to his class, and you're telling him, no, you can't go back to the class. So you confuse him. He's autistic, he's ODD, and he's EBD, and he also got a speech layer. But the moral of the story is I'm out here to stand up for my son, my black autistic son. I want other parents to understand, if you don't know how to voice for your child, this will happen to yours one day too.
And that's why they're here today, like I said, for full justice and accountability. I'm proud of their child, and I'm proud of the Brandons for taking this step to encourage their son not to plead guilty, even though there would have been a diversionary program, and they said it would have gotten off his record. If you're not guilty for something, you shouldn't plead guilty to anything. That would have been a way for this to all be swept under the rug. They did not want this swept under the rug. They want their child to feel affirmed in who he is, and his experience being put in handcuffs, placed in the back of a car, going through the whole criminal justice process is something that can never be taken away from him. We don't know what that is going to make him feel like when he looks in the mirror at himself. Who is he going to view himself as? Does he view himself as somebody who's a criminal, somebody who deserves to be treated this way for doing absolutely nothing wrong? And that's why they're stepping up. They're setting the record straight. They're letting their child know that he's affirmed in who he is, and I'm proud of the Brandons for stepping up. And we hope that the school district, along with the Department of Public Safety, they implement new policies where everybody who's at the school, officers included, are trained to deal with all types of children, and they do everything in their possible to make this right for the Brandons, and more importantly, make this right for the young child, because this is something that's going to stick with them.
Exactly,
Right.
because still today it's hard for him to go to school, because once when he walked through that school door, that officer there. When I go to that school to pick up my son, that officer there, and
Sitting in
he
the front
make
office.
sure he speak. If he don't speak, he wave, and I'm like, I don't know any camera with you. I don't want to speak to you for nothing.
It just, the board educate. I don't want the same officer that's gonna be patrolling the streets for a robbery, assault, anything
Drug
with
bust.
drug bust, a heightened level of aggression dealing with my precious child going to school, and you have that same aggression with a kid that's a minor and no communication with the parents. That's a total failure by the Board of Education and the Public Safety Department, period.
It's a big difference from being let's say a correctional officer in a jail setting versus being a student resource officer in a school setting. Those are two different roles. Although it's law enforcement, there's two different types of people you're dealing with. In one setting, you're trying to keep order and maintain order in a correctional institution, whether that's a state correctional institution or a local county jail. In a school setting, do we want our children to feel like they are in
Criminals.
the Department of Corrections, that they are criminals, that they deserve to be talked to less than, that because they have a disability and they may not be able to express themselves, that they are subject to the same type of conduct that would happen in a jail setting? I don't believe any parent wants that, and that's what the Brandons don't want as well. But we've done a lot of talking. I know y'all may have some specific questions. I will, if we can answer the question, we'll answer them. If there's some that we can't answer, I'll let you know that we can't answer. But we appreciate your time.
Has the school district responded to you guys at all, or talked to you guys?
We have not received a formal response to the lawsuit. I have not received any communication from their either general counsel or any outside counsel on the case. But they have been served with a copy of the lawsuit. And I believe there may have been another article that was written by the Post and Courier that did not come from our office. So that probably was either sent from the school district, the police department, or some independent research on the public index.
We got it from
What's that?
I said we got it from Public Index.
Oh, public index? Okay.
Yeah.
Public index.
Just wondering. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know you guys talked about, some changes with how SROs handle these kind of situations in schools. What are some specific changes that you guys would like to fight for in the school system?
Well, let me answer that question.
Training.
I think that the most important thing is training. They need to be trained specifically on dealing with special needs children. Every child that goes into school is different, and there is a need for special school resource officers. Every parent, especially with school shootings and things like that, we want our schools safe. But we also want the children to feel safe while they're in school as well. And just like teachers are trained with individual educational plans, so do officers need to be trained with those. And if they are training, there needs to be more training. They need to understand that they have to keep that in mind. So if an officer, let's say officer approaches a kid, and the kid does not respond immediately to the officer should think, well, is this child not responding to me because maybe they have a disability? Maybe they just had a bad day. Maybe they didn't have breakfast before they went to school in the morning. It should be handled just the same way as it would on the street or inside a jail. So there needs to be different training for officers, and they have to channel that too. It's different from if you just read what's in your training plan and you just go in there, but you haven't taken it to your heart and you're not following through on that. It's not going to be effective. So it needs to be more training, more policies, more procedures, more screening on it. In this situation, it's my understanding that the officer was in the jail setting before he was a student resource officer. And it doesn't matter if you've been an officer for 1 year, you've been an officer for 25 years. If you go be in a school setting, there needs to be a different set of training. There should be a different type of qualifications, different type of even screening for that. So that's what we would like to see. Department of Education, state, and also the public school district, they have a lot of policies and procedures. This is something they should look at. It's not just a trend here, it's across the country. We know a lot more about autism now than we did, let's say, even 25, 30 years ago. So that needs to be addressed in all law enforcement training.
Do we know? Go ahead.
You got it.
Do we know if the officer was reprimanded? Did they address the situation?
What we
not
do-
further my
He's still employed with them?
He's still
Yes.
employed.
It's
Still
the
work
same-
there.
It's the same officer, like we say, since the incident happened, we pull up to the school, this is going to be the first officer you see sit above the administrative, period. He's still there.
He's still there. And, what we really, the heart of this is the training for the officer. And it really goes to the Department of Public Safety, right? And also to the school district, that they need to look at who they're putting in the school setting. And just because you're an officer for a lot of years, as I said, does not necessarily mean that you have either the temperament or the background to be in the school setting. I'm not saying that he did or didn't. I'm just saying with the actions that we saw weren't reflective of how I want my young kids treated in the school setting. They didn't want their son treated like that. Anybody watching this press conference or hearing this, read this article, won't want their child seen as well. And he's still there. They prosecuted this case. It wasn't like you're suspended for a day, go sit at detention. No, he was prosecuted with a case number. We came up here.
I had to go pick up his records.
We were about to go to trial on the case, and it wasn't even,
Yes.
it should never even went that far at all. And my belief is that it went that far because they didn't want this to happen. They didn't want to address the heart of the issue, blaming the children, blaming minors for something that adults who are trusted to take care of them should address, blaming minors for what the Department of Education, the school board, the police department should address their policy, procedures, and training. The kid did nothing wrong. Long story short, the officer's still there.
Okay. So when it comes down to IEPs, I know those are created by school psychologists, school counselors. What have they been saying?
Well, with IEP, the people that's in the meeting is you have a representative, a teacher, a special education teacher, and everything, and we all have to sit at the table and agree if this is good enough for the child in the setting at the time. My son IEP get updated every school year. Anytime it's an issue that we put in the IEP, if it's not working, I can call a meeting at any time and we change that. But every teacher and every person that come in encounter with my son, they have a copy of his IEP, even the bus driver.
Yes, ma'am. I'm aware of that. What have they said after this incident?
Let me answer that question real quick.
Nothing.
We
One,
changes IEP, pretty much.
I don't want
Individual's
them.
house.
Let me answer this question real quick. Hit the psychologists and the medical professionals who created the IEP. That's going to be an issue for this case. All right, and I can't say exactly what they said, and I don't feel comfortable with the Brandons talking about what the doctors may have said or did not say. They're parents here. They're not medical professionals. They know their child he's on the spectrum of autism. He has an IEP, and what they know is what they've experienced and they've seen their son go through. And I can't say specifically the medical diagnosis for it, but we do know this is a traumatic for him. And he's a young kid. He's gonna, as he grows up, he'll probably learn more about what this experience has done with him. This is something that's gonna stick with him for a while. And even when he's an adult on his own, he may have more counseling. When he's a father himself, as most African American men who have had interactions with law enforcement, this is gonna, it's gonna filter his lens on how he parents and how he's gonna feel. So stuff that's outside of any four walls of a medical document or a piece of paper, he had a introduction to the criminal justice system when he should have never been introduced to it, and it's going to affect how he views law enforcement, how he views those he can trust for years to come, and that won't be reflected on any piece of paper. That's something that, you know, it's going to take some deep diving, some navigating for him to do, and the parents as well. When their son leaves, they have to, another worry they have.
Yeah, like right now, even though I'm talking to y'all, I really want to look at my phone. I have to keep my phone on me because I never know if I'm getting another call like that.
Right, and I'll just leave y'all with this little bit of information. It's been a major inconvenience for the parents after your sons get assaulted, to where he can't go to school full days. You get what I'm saying? So you got to I got to leave my business to go pick him up when he's supposed to be able to be in school a full day, comfortable and learning and educating himself and getting himself to the next level. But he can't do that because of this situation here, where we have to pick him up every day early.
And any parent who's ever been through something with their child knows that your world stops when something happens to your kid. Anything that you had, you're focused solely on your child. But the world keeps spinning. The world still wants you to go to work. They still want you, you know, you still have bills to pay. You still have to handle things, but your only focus is on your child. And that's what the brand has been. Their focus has been on their child and helping him recover through this. And it's still going to be like that for years to come.
One more question, for me at least. You talked about use of force in the lawsuit. What exactly was that use of force that you guys are talking about with their son?
Well, one thing I'll encourage everybody to look, if y'all reach out to the Department of Public Safety, especially with what information regarding firearms being pulled, is immediate use of force, number one. Even when there's no trigger being pulled, it's considered use of force once any firearm is pulled by an officer. And number two, there was a physical aspect of this whole interaction, which resulted in the minor being on the ground and placed in cuffs, then put in the car. We don't know if we've even received all the information, all the videos about, you know, what happened, especially when it comes down to the guns being pulled and the facts that the brands mentioned regarding their son in the back. So this was a physical incident. It was an arrest, a physical arrest. It wasn't sit in the corner, we're going to call your parents, we have a conference with the officials. That's not what this was. This was an arrest. In your head, think about an arrest you've seen on the street or arrest you've seen after a fight. This was what that was, but it was not an altercation. It was an altercation that was initiated by the child. This was a situation that was not handled properly. It was escalated from the school and the employees and the law enforcement officer, and it was a physical arrest with him being placed in the car. And I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it.
Any other questions?
I have one more. Did they ever get like an apology or anything from the district or from the officer after it happened? Do y'all expect that or anything?
We have never received an apology, and we want justice and accountability, and we've never received an apology. I've handled cases like this all across the state and other places, and even in the most egregious cases, I've never seen an apology before. The more the apology, there needs to be accountability and change, and that's what they're after. Anything else?
Anything else you would like to add?
Well, yeah, one thing I would like to add is, well, the Brandons, I think it's important as parents that they feel affirmed in standing up for their child. They've done nothing wrong by doing this. They've done nothing wrong by seeking recourse through the civil justice system. I think that's important. There was an article I read that said something about this is not the first time that Ms. Brand has been involved in a case. The real story is this is not the first time that the minor has been abused by those trusted to take care of him. And the minor, and Ms. Brandon and her father, and Malcolm, the father, have to step up for their child. And it's important that that's done so that others know, one, that they should feel affirmed stepping up for their children, and more importantly, that their son understands that he's affirmed. And we want full justice and accountability here. Those are two words, sounds real simple, should be real straightforward, and I hope that the Department of Public Safety and the school district does what should be done in this case.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.